I didn't think the pain from the shingles rash would affect simple, everyday tasks like bathing, getting dressed, or even walking around. I was wrong. Though not everyone at risk will develop it, 99% of people over the age of 50 already have the virus that causes shingles, and it could reactivate at any time. I developed it, and the blistering rash lasted for weeks. Don't learn the hard way, like I did. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today. Sponsored by GSK.
I am now going to pronounce sentence. Sentence.
Quiet Riot.
Welcome to Quiet Riot B-Side, the bit where we go beyond the headlines and get into the tracks the news forgot to play. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi, here to put the needle down on the bits you missed.
And I'm Kenny, here to make sure that the bloody record doesn't skip.
Did anyone see the news that Trump got hid in a Turkish food cart as a decoy to not go on Air Force One flying out of Iran? And then he turned around to all the journalists and was like, it'll be you that gets shot down, not me.
I'm surprised there haven't been more jokes about smuggling a pig out of Turkey.
You realise that Trump's going to want to use that form of transport everywhere he goes now. I'm going there in a food truck.
I mean, to be fair, if I were a terrorist, the first place I would look for Trump is a food truck. Next time they should hide him in a library or something. No one will think to look there. But can I ask you, what is the most embarrassing place you have ever had to hide in? I know Naomi will have a story or two from her teenage years.
Oh, God.
Do you know, I don't, because of my outgoing gregarious nature, I tend to lean into situations where I probably should be hiding a little bit. Anyone would too. So, Campbell's done it again. Why didn't you just go into a toilet? The one time that I remember when I should have hidden was when I was launching Metro in Scotland, and I'd been sent out. I might have told the story before, but you have to listen again. I'd been sent up to Glasgow on an early morning flight from London City Airport to launch this newspaper in top secrecy. Obviously, if other newspapers found out we were launching a free newspaper in Glasgow and Edinburgh, there would be hell. So I get the earliest flight I can. I arrive at Glasgow Airport. I sneak my way from the London City Airport flight, and I'm making a beeline straight through the parches at Glasgow Airport, making sure that nothing I do could even ever hint at the fact that I'm there to launch a new newspaper in a week. Walking towards me is the guy that used to sit next to me when I worked at the Daily Express. Literally, there's four of us walking through this airport, and I hear the voice going, Kerry, are you here? What are you doing? Are you launching Metro up here? And I mumbled some nonsense about being up there to see an old girlfriend. If I had just done what Trump has done and found like a laundry truck or something, anything at all, I'm willing to hide behind.
Or a fridge, the Johnson method.
Yeah.
That sounds iffy on so many levels, isn't it?
How about you, Naomi? Have you ever been caught at a schoolmate's place where you shouldn't have been, or had to duck into a closet somewhere?
When you ask me the question, the emotion comes back. I've got an echo of it. There's a memory. I can't actually draw anything specific, but what I do vividly remember was when I was a very young teenager, and my brother and his wife and baby would come to visit us in Northern Ireland. I would be relocated to the boot of the car when we would go for a meal out with them. So my mum and dad would be in the front, my brother, his wife and baby would be in the back. And then the Labradors and I would be shoved into the boot. In Northern Ireland during the 1990s, there were a lot of roadblocks, right? There were a lot of police checks on the roads and things like that. And of course, very illegal, particularly to have a child in the boot of a car without a seatbelt on. And so I'd be told to lie down and let these two obese Labradors sort of cover me. So I'd be going along a pretty bumpy Northern Irish road with a Labrador's anus quite close to my nose. While everyone else is sort of comfy in the front on the way to our Sunday roast or whatever it was. So I do have that memory of my parents being complicit in hiding me.
Can I tell you one other occasion when I should have hidden? Because now I'm thinking about it, my life is just pockmarked with episodes where just doing a runner quickly would have saved me so much grief. Back in the day when I was working in Kensington, running Metro, we got an invite to go downstairs because I have to be careful how much of a review of this, but They had a redesign at the entrance to the Daily Mail and Metro building entrance. And the chairman's wife...
This is Derry Street in Kensington.
It's Derry Street, that's right. Just off the high street. The chairman's wife had overseen the redecoration of the sort of the visitor toilets as you came in to the offices, and there was a new corridor with pictures of editors and stuff in it. Anyway, we got the invite to go down, and there'd be an opening and a little speech, whatever. And as a result, I found myself in the ladies' toilets, which were very nicely decorated, standing next to Paul Dacre, thinking, how the fuck do I not make eye contact with him? What have I got to say to this man in normal circumstances? Never mind standing in the ladies' toilet, looking around him like a fool, going, how did I get here? If I had just grabbed the cubicle door, shut it behind me, my life would be so much easier. It's the longest 15 seconds of my entire life.
Come on, Alex, then. Tell us yours.
Eye contact is the least of your worries if you find yourself standing next to Paul Dacre in the toilet. I'll tell you what, I'll just give you a taster and say the rest is for our next Ask Us Anything session for subscribers. I once hid in an Oslo park covered with leaves, literally in an inlet of a tree, covered myself with dead leaves while Interpol was looking for me.
Wow. Okay, we're going to need the full juicy juice on that. Get signed up to ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod to get an invite to the next Ask Us Anything session where Alex will reveal all.
And that is how to generate subscriptions, people. Now, yesterday we discussed this scorcher of a summer and the focus it forces on the climate crisis and mitigation.
Today, we're returning to the issue of prison places, of early releases, and of the political impossibility of finding a solution.
And it's an issue that dovetails into this other perennial hot potato, where to house asylum claimants. Let's get into it. Quiet Riot.
A mini moral panic about the early release of prisoners seems to have become an annual British tradition, like Morris dancing or celebrity traitors. Britain's prisons crisis has its roots in a failure to add sufficient new places between 2010 and 2024, wrote Andy Burnham on his Facebook page last week. Just 500 places were added and 23 prisons were closed. As a result, the system is now dangerously close to capacity, and we are running the risk of new offenders not being incarcerated in a timely manner, the Post ended. Those are the basic facts in their starkest reduction. But what lays underneath them is a complex interaction of everything from the state's philosophy on crime and punishment, conflicting theories on rehabilitation versus public safety, the political exploitation of public anxieties, immigration and human rights law, and even planning and procurement, resulting in the UK's inability to execute public projects at speed or scale. Naomi, what are the basic facts and figures of this latest iteration of what, for brevity, people have taken to calling the prisons crisis?
Well, I think the easiest way to imagine it is as a balloon. If you squeeze the prison end of it, it bulges at the probation end. But if we take the kind of three main areas, first, you've got the court bottleneck, right? There is a Crown Court backlog of over 73,000 cases. So people are waiting a long time to even be tried. So they're being held often, in jail.
Which is itself against natural justice, right?
Exactly,
to be waiting years to be tried.
Justice delayed is justice denied for sure. And also, for the victim as much as the alleged assailant. And then you've got the prison capacity gap. So England and Wales is running about 87,000 prisoners in a system built for 70,000. And the only way it's being kept from completely overflowing is by releasing people early. And it is worth pointing out that the overcrowding doesn't just mean you've got too many people in each cell. It means less time out of the cell. It means fewer educational and workplaces being done, which has an impact on rehabilitation, longer waits for healthcare, and of course, more violence and self-harm. And there is fire safety issues there as well. And the service is committed to taking out non-fire safe cells by next year. And that's around 20,000, I think maybe a bit more, 23,000 cells that don't currently meet safety standards. So, you've got that coming down the line too.
So we're about to lose another whole bunch of places.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah. Or we'll have to face extending the number of prisoners being held in dangerous conditions. And then you've got the probation squeeze. So there is a huge labour shortage within the system at the moment. They are at least 3,200 staff down out of the roughly 15,000 sentence management staff they need. And the caseload for each probation officer that is in post is way over 100% capacity. They're just not able to look after the people who they are meant to be helping in a post-prison environment and rehabilitating back into the community. So what the sentencing reforms are doing is very deliberately pushing more offenders into the community supervision route rather than jail. So the fix for prisons piles even more onto the probation end of things, and then reoffending is more likely to occur, and round we go. And reoffending costing the taxpayer about £21 billion a year. So this is a whole system thing. And I think we're going to be talking in more detail about things like you've mentioned, the philosophical view of how we treat prisoners, the lack of planning availability and the restrictions on planning to get stuff built, MPs not wanting them to be in their constituencies. All of that is just adding fuel to the fire.
Quiet, Riot. Hey, I like your new RAV4.
Thanks, yours too.
What does RAV stand for anyway?
To me, it's the Remarkably Advanced Vehicle.
Really? To me, it's the runway approved vehicle for its amazing style.
What about Remarkably Adaptable Vehicle because of its versatile cargo space?
Or really admired vehicle?
Oh, or Really Awesome Vehicle.
It really is the recreational activity vehicle. The stylish 2026 Toyota RAV4 Limited. What's your RAV4?
Quiet, Riot. But let me ask you, Alex, is the other side of the equation ever properly explored? What is this doing to the processing of cases through the system, or even before that, the arrests?
So not only is it never explored sufficiently, it's never even mentioned, Naomi.
No.
I've never even heard a question asked to politicians who go in these programs and say it's outrageous that people should be released. Because what you have at the other end, so there was a National Police Chiefs Council circular that was issued on the 14th of May, 2024. I mentioned that because the date is very, very significant because it was still under the previous Conservative government and is still in force. So this hasn't been withdrawn or altered in some way. And it reads, I quote, "Consideration is to be given to pausing non-priority arrests and any planned operations where large numbers of arrests may take place to ease the pressure within the criminal justice system." So we're talking about massive drug busts and things like that, things that generate a large number of arrests at the same time. They're being paused, they're being delayed, not even getting to the stage where you're arrested. And then there is a big gap in the time before you're prosecuted, and then there may be an impact to your sentencing because of what's going on. We're at the stage where the police are pausing operation to catch people that they know are engaged in criminal activity because there's no capacity in the system. And that is never discussed. Everyone is talking about, don't release X kind of offender. But X kind of offender may well be at the other end, not being arrested and stopped from committing X offense because there's no capacity in the system.
It's such an important point, and it's one we should remember as we go through the rest of this segment, is that when we talk about how bad the figures are in this country, the point that you've just made, Alex, is a stark reminder that these are not the real figures.
Yeah.
The whole thing, the crisis figures are an indication of the problem. They don't give us any indication of actually how serious the problem is. We don't know, do we?
And then there's sentencing itself. It's relevant to say that the previous government didn't build enough prison places. But one also has to add that it presided over gigantic sentencing inflation, it's called, right?
Yeah.
So in September 2024, again at the tail end of that period of Tory or Tory-led government, 5 of the most senior former judges in England and Wales made an intervention, wrote to the government saying, you have to look at prison sentences. So Lord Woolf, Lord Phillips, Lord Thomas, Lord Burnett, all of whom served as Lord Chief Justice, and Sir Brian Levison, who was also head of criminal justice, wrote that sentence lengths had approximately doubled for the same offences, and so had the prison population. usual caveats, correlation is not causation, but it's a very stark thing to observe for 5 extremely senior judges to say that we don't increase prison places, but we keep increasing sentences, and that has doubled the prison population. And so when you're looking at early releases, you're actually, on a broad basis, I'm not saying on an individual case-by-case basis, but on a broad basis, actually you're talking about releasing people at the same sort of stage their sentence would have ended 40 years ago for the same crime. And so all this confected furore seems to me deeply unhelpful, creates a sense in the public that these people should be locked away for 20 years and instead are getting out in 9. So there's a more nuanced debate to be had. But how can that compete with screaming 300-point headlines going, rapists will be let out in the streets?
The problem has accelerated in recent years. So back in 2010, the number of people who were banged up for more than 4 years, that was 36% of people sentenced were getting more than 4 years. So just over a third. Last year, 48% of people were getting longer than 4 years, almost a half. It's a huge acceleration in the last 10 to 15 years. We're making things worse.
You put that side by side with a failure to build prison places. I mean, I don't want to particularly sit here and argue for lower sentences for all crimes, because that would be a blunt philosophical point to make. But you can't both increase sentences
and not build
prisons. I mean, you can't do that. That's ridiculous. Naomi, should we be going back to a more basic discussion of what sort of thing we punish and how we punish it in order to control the sort of huge input and the big sentences, rather than just panicking about the output? And do we know why Timson resigned from that review? Because it was seen by so many people as a really positive appointment. Do we know what happened there?
I'll answer those questions in order, because you've got a great question at the top of that about restorative justice, about other means of punishing people that are more commensurate to the crime they've committed. England and Wales has the highest imprisonment rate in Western Europe. And there is a big population serving short sentences for non-violent offences. And that is why the 2026 Sentencing Act introduced a presumption against sentences under 12 months. So I think that is a pretty tacit admission by the Starmer government that we were jailing people that we didn't need to. And so those in the kind of prison reform camp would say, you know, people on recall, drug offences, petty theft, non-payment of fines, low-level public order disturbance, they're probably things that don't need to be penalised and punished within the prison system. And they are inputs that you can turn down with policy, and they are cheaper and more effective to handle in the community for sure, given that reoffending costs about 21 billion a year. On the James Timpson, now he was the first minister to resign on the day that Andy Burnham wins the leadership. We don't really know. What is interesting is that he was quite long-serving by recent standards. So the Prison Reform Trust noted this. There were 13 different Conservative prisons ministers between 2010 and 2024. Like, they got through them at the rate of nearly one a year, making him, having done 2 years, the longest serving for 15 years, which is quite incredible.
I mean, that is amazing in itself, isn't it?
It is, and surely
it speaks to the crisis, doesn't it?
Exactly, as do the similar number of housing ministers that we've had over that period as well. And he didn't say he was resigning for any reason other than, he hoped to have stayed on, and he was very grateful to Keir Starmer, etc., etc. So it sounds like it was a decision within Camp Burnham not to keep him, or maybe he sensed that and so resigned before he wasn't offered the chance to stay on. But all honesty, I don't know, and I don't think he has publicly released anything that would give us much more of an indication of that.
Yes, no, all I've seen is sort of proxy, unnamed sources close to him saying that he felt he had basically taken the issue as far as he could, I suspect without a lot more money and willingness to do more radical reform. And that is, I think, where a lot of the problems begin, because I mean, the same thing would happen as we're seeing with early release now. The moment you start to look at, say, a reduction of sentencing for X kind of crime, what opposition figures and the press will do is go out and find the most egregious possible example of that kind of crime. And it becomes a completely unpassable debate, doesn't it, Kenny?
It does. And that's one of those issues where reframing becomes so very, very important. I mean, short custodial sentences that you mentioned, I think they're really particularly worthy of a challenge, because a prison sentence of 6 months or 12 months, that's certainly enough to lose you your job. You'll probably lose you your tenancy if you're renting.
Your relationship might break down.
Exactly. Your family is in the bin as well. All that sort of stability, if you had stability going into the prison system, is taken away.
And if you're very young, it's long enough to get you hooked on drugs. It's long enough to teach you other crimes, to give you a network of people on the outside who will maybe force you to work for that gang. We've heard repeated stories from young men who said, I got nicked for having a little bit too much weed in my pocket. And 6 months later, I come out and I'm, now in with a network of people that are promising me I can make millions. It was jail that made my life terrible.
And we have to remember that part of the reason that we jail people is to rehabilitate them and stop them being criminals when they come back out. Otherwise, all you're doing is circulating people through the system. And being locked up for 6 months in general it doesn't give you enough time to do any sort of meaningful rehabilitation work. This stuff is difficult, particularly when, as you say now, I mean, you're all of a sudden in an environment where really very able criminals perhaps are helping you be a better criminal faster than the system can say, hang on a second.
Because they're understaffed, they're kept in their cell for far longer every day than they're meant to, having a detrimental impact on their mental health, but also denying them those opportunities to, study for a qualification, get a job within the prison, all that kind of stuff. So it really cannot be the best place, particularly for young people on a first offence for a relatively minor crime.
No, and James Timpson was absolutely the poster boy for dealing with this problem properly. He's the former Timpson boss, and he spent years employing ex-offenders. They're famous for it. His basic philosophy was that a job and somewhere stable to live can prevent more crime than simply banging up somebody in an overcrowded cell for longer. And when you zoom back out and look at it, you go, oh, well, you know what? That actually makes quite a lot of sense, doesn't it? But it doesn't make for such sexy headlines.
Quiet, Riot. Starting or growing your own business can be intimidating and lonely at times. Your to-do list may feel endless with new tasks, and lists can easily begin to overrun your life. So finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything as a built-in business partner can be a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. From household names like Gymshark, Rare Beauty, and Heinz, to brands just getting started. Shopify has hundreds of ready-to-use templates that can help you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand's style. And you can tackle all the important tasks in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more. No need to save multiple websites or try to figure out what platform is hosting the tool that you need. And if people haven't heard about your brand, you can get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you, with easy-to-run email and social media campaigns to reach customers wherever they're scrolling or strolling. Start your business today with the industry's best business partner, Shopify, and start hearing. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/realm. Go to shopify.com/realm. That's shopify.com/realm.
Suffering from dry, tired, irritated eyes? Don't let dry eyes win. Use Sustain Pro. It hydrates, restores, and protects dry eyes for up to 12 hours. Sustain Pro. Triple action dry eye relief.
Quiet, Riot.
Are there any low-hanging fruit in terms of, decriminalizing drugs or, in terms of doing one or two things that significantly affect the inflow of people into the criminal justice system?
I think the lowest hanging fruit actually isn't, legalizing marijuana or whatever, much as I think actually that's a pretty sensible idea. I think it's in some way stopping the reflex that so many of us have, that every crime needs a prison sentence. We have to ask ourselves, But which people in this system are we afraid of and we think need to be locked up? And which people are we just angry about? Because those are two very different emotions. They both have to be addressed by the criminal justice system. Of course they do. But being angry at people and being afraid of people is not the same thing. And I think that reflex action would be one of the most wonderful things that we could change. Naomi, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think we look to Portugal, who have decriminalised most drug use, and it has had a very beneficial effect on the country as a whole, and certainly on, mental health and offences related to underworld activity. Remember that organised crime is usually formed off the back of drug cartels. I think it is an absolute no-brainer for us to decriminalise a lot of that and take it out of the power and the hands of people that have such an enormously detrimental impact on the lives of often young boys, but young women too. So that for me is always the one that I would champion. And I do think that we have to think long and hard about sending women to jail, separating them from children, and are there other ways that we can work with women offenders outside of the prison system? Because for the majority of them, it really isn't the place that turns their life around for them.
I mean, this is not special pleading, we should add. It's a function of the fact that women tend to be involved in very different offences to those that men tend to be involved in. So equal treatment for similar offences, if that makes sense. But overall, when you look at the prison population, women are in jail for very different reasons to men.
Yeah, no one is saying Rose West shouldn't have been locked up.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure the Daily Mail would make that headline as of what you just said. And that, I think, is part of the problem.
Should we move on to the politics of it then? Because we're all in broad agreement that there's a crisis here, and that the approach that we take in this country is making things worse all the time. And we touched on what the Conservatives have been saying.
Between 2010 and 2024, 500 new prison places were added net.
Yeah, because some of the old Victorian ones were decommissioned.
Okay, so
but 14,000 were
is a dishonest
built.
figure, isn't it? If you're talking about net, it's 500.
Yeah.
Between 2010 and 2015, 7,000 frontline prison officer posts were cut in England and Wales. The prison service was slashed by 21%. And now we're in this mess that it's at 97% capacity.
Well, look, this is all going back a very long time. We're obviously under new leadership and have a new approach, and you'll be hearing a lot more from us in the coming months about prison places.
Do you guys think the opposition's being sufficiently held to account for their failure to do something about this when there was time for them actually to make a difference?
Not only are they not being held to account, the question is barely asked and very easily dismissed with, come on, they've been in power for 2 years. When are they going to stop blaming us for everything? As if, mega prisons are things that you can magic out of thin air in the space of a couple of months. But I think there's also, like I said, the other dimension is sentencing inflation. We saw that a lot. We saw a kind of bidding war during the last 15 years to say, no, we're going to be tougher on crime by announcing longer prison sentences for this thing without really any thought of what goes on after that. But I think there's also a sort of a tendency to let them off quite easily for the philosophical failure at the core of it, which is what you touched on, Kenny. The conservative tough on crime mantra at the moment is just send everyone to prison for longer and longer stretches. And it just doesn't work. And I don't know when I have heard anyone challenged on that level. I genuinely don't know when the last time was that I heard someone challenged to explain their strategy in terms of rehabilitation. How does that help, instead of just going, you can't let this kind of person out of jail? I was wondering, is there any technological solutions maybe?
The use of ankle bracelets and such like is there. We've got tracking technology that follows us all.
We're the most surveilled country in the world.
Exactly that.
But I seem to have read somewhere that, for instance, when it comes to young offenders, like denying them any kind of electronic access would be sort of tantamount to putting them in jail, for instance, that you could deal with a lot of young adult offenses by putting them in a Wi-Fi jail, as it were, sort of Wi-Fi exclusion zone. No, but they're trialing it in a couple of other countries, and it seems to work quite well.
Well, if somebody can make money out of it, it'll be rolled out in this country. if it looks like it's a bit problematic and might lead to headlines in the usual media outlets screaming we're being soft on young thugs, then maybe not so much. But the thing is, the reality of the situation is the government is going to have to look at all these solutions. All these things have to be on the table, because at the moment, our entire criminal justice system seems to sort of orbit around where's there an empty bed and feed it back through the system.
I also think that the opposition have got off far too lightly, not just on circulating through 13 prison ministers over a 14-year period, but so many thousands more prison places required because of their philosophical approach to longer and longer sentences, that I do think they need to be held to account for that a little bit more. And the Starmer government kicked off a government building project that will see more prison places being built than at any time since the Victorian era. We've got 5,000 of them under construction, 14,000, I think, come on board by the early 2030s. But then we've also got a growing prison population of about 3,000 a year. So actually, we can't just build our way out of it. We are going to have to do both things, of build more and jail fewer. And the Tories built less and jailed more for longer.
And this is something that the judges touch on in that intervention about sentencing inflation. What they say is that once you put sentences up for a particular kind of crime, it's almost impossible politically to then reduce them. It's almost impossible politically to then say 12 years is too long for this kind of thing, because instantly the opposition will go, you're soft on crime. And that's what creates sentencing inflation, that sentencing can only go one way, in one direction. And by succumbing to pressure, it becomes a one-way valve for more prisoners and more prisoners and more prisoners into the system.
Or it becomes the way that even more of the right move back towards the death penalty and go, all right, well, here's a way we'll deal with it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that, actually, Naomi. Is this a sort of perfect setup for Farage and his politics to say, they failed, none of them care about you, let me have a go?
I think he absolutely will do that. They've already started doing it in terms of linking it to their pet project, immigration. So deport all foreign prisoners immediately, regardless of whether or not their country will take them off to some far-flung part of the world if their original country won't take them back. So of course they will. But as we started recording today, actually, it was a story in Byline Times that Farage has now been referred to the Metropolitan Police over misconduct in public office, and the Met Police are now looking into it. So he may have to, take one of the places in a prison cell if he is found guilty of these crimes. So he may be on a slightly difficult. You might see the backpedaling on being tough on crime over the course of the next year.
Can I ask, so another issue that feeds into this, which we've discussed many, many times before, you touched on it, Naomi, is a kind of general inability to deliver big projects. And prisons seem to me like the perfect example of how planning policy allows local objections to block things that are of national importance. In a sort of Burnham era where the watchword seems to be devolution, how do you solve that particular conundrum?
Good luck, I would say. I mean, one of the things about devolution is that what you can do is take the perception of decision-making around controversial projects out of Westminster and drop it into a regional centre. You can say, look, it's not Westminster that's making this controversial decision, it's people who understand the area better. The bottom line, though, is that in any region of any significant size, you're going to have MPs fighting like cats in sacks, not to have things like big prisons or waste recycling plants or any of those things that we don't want in our backyard. We're all going to be fighting not to have them. At the same time, we can't even agree where houses are being built. So, let's not kid ourselves that any of this stuff is easy. When we can't, agree to build substantial numbers of new houses without having a fist fight at every single council planning meeting, we've got very little chance of having a smooth system where things like prisons are waved through the system. And I mean, on that point, I think, because we're talking about things like planning objections, when it comes to issues around rehabilitation, there's a temptation to focus on building stuff like prisons. But actually, and this is the interconnectivity of things, one of the biggest problems we've got around prisons is a lack of housing. because when you release prisoners and they haven't got anywhere to stay, they go back into prison. Reoffending among people released who are homeless is about 65%. Among rough sleepers, it's even higher, 67%.
Yeah.
So if you release somebody from prison with nowhere to sleep and are surprised when they commit another crime, that's not being tough on crime. It's essentially a reoffending strategy. So planning holistically is an issue. It's not just planning around the prisons themselves.
I mean, especially since we've moved now into the ridiculous position of criminalizing certain aspects of vagrancy.
Yes.
Even by virtue of the fact that these people have nowhere to live, they're committing a crime in many cases.
Quiet Riot. Pay's checkout is offered by your banks and credit unions. So when you shop online at participating merchants, your cards appear in one place, ready to use and kept up to date. And the best part, your actual card number isn't shared when you check out, because boundaries are healthy, like no work emails after 6. One small step for boundaries, one big leap for checkout. Pays. It checks out. Activation required. See Pays.com to learn more. Terms and conditions apply. Quiet Riot.
Naomi, can I ask you something a little bit cheeky and off left field?
Yeah.
Is this also a failing of first past the post? Defenders of first past the post always talk up this local connection, and it does offer significant political advantages. But does it also mean that local MPs feel they have no choice but to act as blockers to everything?
There is no defence for first past the post at all. So I'm very, very happy to agree with you on this. And of course, it is worth pointing out that under a proportionate system, depending on what system you choose, you do not have to break the constituency link. And there are ways to have very local MPs within a much more proportionate system. I think what you have in the current incarnation of our electoral mathematics at the moment is far more marginality. So once we hated first past the post because it delivered such safe seats for such an enormous number of MPs that there was absolutely no point in voting for anybody else because they could not win. What we've seen over the course of the last decade is a lot more seats becoming marginal or even hyper marginal. What do I mean by that? Well, plus or minus 10% or 5% separating the top two candidates. And so that marginality will make MPs feel much more frightened of doing anything that might cost them a few borrowed votes from another party. So if you are a Lib Dem MP and you're borrowing votes from the Tories because you're in a Lib Dem Reform marginal seat and you're only a whisker ahead of the Reform candidate, you're not going to want to be seen as anything other than tough on crime, etc. So I think you're right. I think there is an element of that playing into this. But really, it's about the NIMBY attitude of Britons themselves and never wanting the thing that will actually make their lives better in their own patch.
And this is, I think, where this interacts with immigration policy. No one wants people anywhere. They riot when you put them up in hotels. They riot when you put them up in temporary accommodation in houses of multiple occupancy. Yeah. They riot if you plan to use disused former military barracks because of the density and number. And you end up in this situation where you have someone like Chris Philp allowed to get away with a statement, we shouldn't be housing illegal immigrants anywhere. And it's like, well, what is your magical solution? That no one will overstay their visa or claim asylum, or, what is your magical solution for how these people vanish instantly or that they don't exist in the first place? And that aspect of it is never challenged. I listened to Nick Robinson questioning Minister Anna Turley on Wednesday morning on Radio 4, and he put this directly to her.
The Prime Minister has said he'll listen to people who don't want military bases used. He's also said that he doesn't like the idea of these houses of multiple occupations, particularly in poorer districts, including in his own constituency, I might say, and yours as well, in Redcar. And you say you're closing hotels. You've got to do all of these things. You've got to put the asylum seekers somewhere, haven't you?
Yeah, of course we have to manage the estate. But I mean, what I saw yesterday, so I was in Blackpool yesterday.
No, but which is
closed the hotel.
Which is it you're going to do of the three options?
I want to illustrate this point. So there was a hotel, the Metropole Hotel, which is a famous and iconic hotel on the seafront in Blackpool that had been used to house asylum seekers, and this was not an appropriate place to put them. That's now been freed up to be put back to community use. That will enable Blackpool, as part of their regeneration, to have a brilliant seaside hotel that it will be used to bring families and to invest in the local economy. We want to make sure that sort of accommodation, which is not appropriate, is freed up and there's less burden on the local community there.
Sure,
of
but
course,
the point I'm making to you, Minister, is you can't say to every different group, we won't house asylum seekers near you. You can't say we'll close hotels, we'll close the HMOs, and we won't open the military bases. You've got to house people somewhere. But that is what the Prime Minister is currently saying, isn't it?
Not at all. He said we will engage and we will listen to people and we'll make sure that all the support goes into place for where we need to do that. But we are moving people out. We are having some success. As I said, we're down to now fewer than 160 asylum hotels. We are moving people into former military bases, into examples like former industrial sites, student accommodation that is more contained, that is better, that we're able to manage people, manage the resources that they need and the support they need, where we're able to limit the impact on a local community. It's much better to have them in places where they can be contained, supported, and everything is on site than just allow these sort of hotels and flashpoints to be happening in communities that really have been asked for many years now to take far more than their fair share.
But no one ever puts that question to opposition figures in reform who say, oh, we just object to this latest plan. And it's like, well, what's your alternative? And the alternative is always some magical land in which no immigration exists. Something that has never existed in the history of humanity. People not moving from place to place is apparently the solution that we're banking on. And no one is challenging the ludicrous nature of that promise. What is the solution in terms of where we put prisons, in terms of where we put areas for, asylum seekers while they're being processed? Like, what is the solution when you're living in an age of social media where the addresses of where people are being housed are released online and then mini pogroms erupt?
There's a time and a place for big decisions to be made, and there's a time and a place for left field thinking. I'm trying to think of an example. This week in Scotland, let's pick an example in Scotland to see if we can learn anything from it. The first locations where houses that are near to upgraded electricity pylons have been revealed this week. And if you in a house that's near one of these new pylons, you'll get 250 quid off your annual electricity bill. So they're tying something that people are a bit unhappy about to a nice solid reward. Okay, you're taking a little bit of a hit for the greater good. So let's throw something back towards you so you don't feel that you're being treated completely unfairly. There's a quid pro quo. So I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see whether it makes any difference. Giving people 250 quid for a pylon. There have always been sort of fees if you've got a telegraph pole or whatever in your garden. You get a few quid from the telephone line company. But this idea that it's a quid pro quo and it's not just a few people having to take one on the chin for the good of society, and it's tough luck if the value of their houses goes down or if the place they live in isn't quite as pleasant. Giving people reasons, genuine reasons to be invested in the solutions rather than only giving them reasons to be against all the potential solutions.
So, Alex, clearly these are issues that are intersecting with one another. Immigration policy, first of all, in a direct way, like the demand for the deportation of foreign criminals that is bubbling up because of reform and the Conservatives to an extent, and of course in the right-wing media. So I want to know what would relieve things and what the figures are.
Okay, so it would relieve things if you could very easily deport all foreign criminals. There are approximately 10,000 foreign national offenders in UK prisons. They make up about 10-11% of the total prison population. They could be considered for deportation or international transfer, depending on bilateral agreements. That's the key bit. So you have to have a kind of exchange agreement with a country in question. You can't just release people randomly into other countries. It's an act of war. We can't complain about Morocco kind of encouraging people to just cross the border into Ceuta and then saying, oh, just take a plane load of prisoners and fly them to another country and leave them there. It's exactly the same thing. You have to ask questions about what the reciprocal arrangements are with a country. They're usually in exchange, so you wouldn't actually gain in numbers. They would give you back some British offenders that they're holding in their prisons, and there are several thousands of those around the world. The numbers also don't take into account people of dual nationality. So there may be quite a lot of people in that population who are foreign nationals but have a right to British citizenship or a dual nationality, who you can't deport at all unless you go down the Begum route of depriving them of British citizenship altogether in order to deport them. All that makes it not a quick and easy fix.
Indeed.
For sure, our arrangements with other countries need to improve. For instance, we have deport now, appeal later schemes covering 20 other countries, which we consider completely safe, basically. You have to also bear in mind that sometimes you will be deporting people into territories with a terrible prison system. And again, human rights issues impose on that. It will be expensive, take a long time, have a lot of legal appeals. And so this notion that you can just wake up one morning as Prime Minister and say, I'm going to take these few thousands of people from here and just deport them to their countries of origin with no international repercussions is, again, magical thinking.
But have you all seen the row between Ben Wallace and Zia Youssef over all of this?
No.
It's so funny. Oh my God, there's not enough popcorn for it. Right. So Ben Wallace, former Tory Defence Secretary, he criticises Reform's deportation scheme. He goes on X and says the majority of foreign nationals in UK prisons are Irish, Polish, Romanian, Albanian and Baltic. And the total number of foreign offenders is always about 10k. Reform have to answer how they will force those countries to take these offenders because they have refused to for decades. And if they won't and then deport them, but they are released, how will that sit with the victims? Zia Youssef then lambasts him, saying, incredible that this moron was Defence Secretary.
Wow.
Our policy is in direct response to your failure, blah, 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 blah. In walks Tory to Reform defector Tim Montgomery. This is not acceptable from Zia Youssef. I don't agree with Ben Wallace, but Zia's language and attitude to any opponent is inappropriate, counterproductive. They are opponents, not morons, blah, 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 blah. And then Ben Wallace can't help himself but come back on Zia with, oh, look, a lesson from a man who has never put a uniform on, just worked at a bank, like he's making up, facts and figures on the hoof, blah, 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 blah. And then I think Farage has said that Zia's language was unacceptable. He agrees with his sentiment, but it was unacceptable language. So they're all fighting like rats in a sack.
Well, yeah, because, like I said, they're all offering actually magical thinking, just magical thinking of different flavors. And if you're going to roll your sleeves up and sort out the prisons crisis, actually, you have to look at the input, you have to look at the output, you have to look at the rates of reoffending, you have to look at our philosophy of rehabilitation, you have to look at public expectations, you have to have a holistic approach. And we're in an environment that doesn't encourage that. It encourages 180 character posts.
Exactly. We live in an age now where politicians offer, instead of solutions, they offer adjectives. And adjectives don't solve anything.
So, Alex, give us a call to action. What can we do in this tricky, thorny area of penal reform?
I would suggest supporting the Howard League for Penal Reform. They are the authority that have been doing so much work on this for such a long time. Their sentence inflation report, that judicial critique that I talked about, is a must-read on this issue. It really is eye-opening to hear senior judges who have been in the system for, half a century observe the changes in the system and say this is heading in a completely unsustainable direction. And this was, of course, a couple of years ago, and we are now there. We are now at the destination that they predicted. So you can get involved with the work of the Howard League, sign up to their mailing list, even donate if you have a few bob to spare. That's what I would suggest.
Quiet, Riot. No. It's the time of the week when Alex drains the Atlantic swamp to tell us what's raising eyebrows stateside. It's time, of course, for God, less America.
Hail to To America and liberty, hail the story and the glory of democracy.
Alex, what have you got for us?
So forget the World Cup, forget the Olympics. This week sees the advent of the first Patriot Games in America. So these were framed by Trump. Oh, she's gone. She's gone. One sentence and we lost.
I'm going to step back from the microphone. Do carry on.
So this was Trump's conception of, some have unkindly suggested, the Hunger Games, in which one young man and one young woman representing each of the 50 states gathered to compete for a big school scholarship worth £250,000 between the two, boy and girl, $125,000 each, which I suggest may contain actually clues as to what the problem really is here. You know, the fact that it costs over $100,000 in America for a young person to go to higher education may be what the president should be looking at, rather than some sort of competition. Anyway, so the president's first Patriot Games are taking place at the moment in Geneva. That's
Geneva?
That's Geneva, Ohio. For those of you not au fait, a number of things have gone wrong with them, as you might expect. First of all, they're not attended by anyone. No one is interested in them. Basically, Disney, who owns ABC, is made to transmit an hour of highlights every day, but there aren't really any highlights because the events, I kid you not, they're like a knockoff Gladiators. And most of the contestants, incidentally, did not know what they would be competing in until they got to the Patriot Games. The only event that had been pre-announced was the 100-meter dash. That was it. Everything else was a last-minute idea. There are team events like tug of war and dodgeball, but no guidelines as to how to score those, since people are relying on individual scores to be crowned the winner of these games. So that's a mess. And on the dark side, there has also been some eyebrows raised about the fact that contestants are over 90% white. There is a preponderance that does not reflect the national demographics at all of people who are homeschooled or come from a Christian private school. All of them have had to do video auditions, and only the ones who declared loyalty to Trump or MAGA in some way were selected. There are links to Turning Point USA, so several people are linked to that organization. They've been interviewed by far-right YouTubers and people like that. And the whole thing has basically turned into a horrific MAGA fest, where even the contestants themselves, presumably because they didn't look American enough, they've ended up not representing the states or territories they're meant to be representing. A notable example being that the male teenager representing Puerto Rico is a sort of blonde, blue-eyed lad from Texas who has apparently some vague family connection to Puerto Rico. The one representing Massachusetts is actually from California. So they just looked at these videos and they basically chose the youths that looked to them most likely to be singing Tomorrow Belongs to Me at a beer fest, and then allocated them to some random state that they had a vague connection with. And so it's been a hideous, hideous case of something that could have been maybe good, was predicted to be embarrassing, but has ended up being straight up MAGA white supremacy. And so this week again, we say, no thank you, God, less America.
I don't know whether to laugh or cry at that one.
Yeah,
a little reminder. I will. I've recovered now.
I'm going to go and hide in a food truck.
Exactly. I mean, it's a reminder that authoritarianism doesn't knock on your door wearing jackboots, isn't it? Sometimes it rocks up wearing matching tracksuits and carrying a flag for a country.
Usually does, actually.
I don't know if y'all caught that shit show they call the Patriot Games, but if you haven't, let me fill you in. First of all, these kids were given categories for what they'd be competing in. Basically, they showed up in Ohio with a pair of sneakers and a prayer and waited for somebody to tell them what fresh hell they were doing next. So, as you can imagine, when we got to the hurdles, it was interesting. And by interesting, I mean some of these kids approached these hurdles like they had just encountered a piece of farm equipment they had never seen before. Organizers basically went, surprise, you're hurdling today. Hope your knees have accepted Jesus. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there watching this thing thinking this is the Patriot Games, because y'all advertised this nonsense like we were about to witness the birth of a new American Olympic tradition. One boy, one girl representing each state. America's finest young athletes. 3 days of competition. National TV, the man in charge himself. Coming for the finale. Honey, I thought somebody was fixing to light a torch. Instead, we got what looked like a church picnic. They wanted the Hunger Games. They got the Vacation Bible School Olympics. Y'all see the stands? Because there were enough empty seats in that place to hold a second Patriot Games. Did anyone else notice where the majority of these kids came from? Whole lot of them came from private schools, Christian schools, some homeschool kids. And get this, some kids weren't even from the states they was representing. We have millions of teenagers in this country, and somebody backstage was apparently hollering, we need a Maine. I have a New Hampshire. Close enough, put a lobster bib on her and send her out. And then the man in charge showed up, and y'all, this is where I almost lost it, because I have watched this man sit through White House meetings looking like somebody put him in rice. Eyes closed, head down, people talking around him. Sir, are you still with us? Somebody tapped the screen, maybe the brightness went down, but put him in the middle of a bunch of teenagers at the Patriot Games, and suddenly he's risen like Jesus, wide awake, grinning ear to ear, looking around like he just drank 3 Red Bulls and discovered coupons.
And that's a wrap on this week's B-side. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you enjoyed it enough to share the episode with a friend, to follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky, and to bung us a few quid a month at ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod.
There's more coming down the line soon from our Cooler Heads family of shows, including Andrew's Podyssey and Arthur Snell's Behind the Lines, and a brand new show launching autumn. So make sure you are signed up on Ko-Fi to be the first in the know.
We'll be back at the weekend, assuming we all survive the apocalypse. We'll have Sunday school as normal. Until then, keep cool, keep calm, and keep on rioting. Just do it quietly and legally. We can't have you adding to the prison population. You wouldn't get a bed anyway.
Last minute thought on that. How about putting all the prisons on Crown Estate? The Royals own or manage roughly 700,000 acres of land up and down the country.
And arguably are an organised crime group.
So anyway, that's my big idea for the week. We love you lots and lots. Bye!
Quiet Riot is an audio production from Cooler Heads. Written and produced by Andreou, Naomi Smith, and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canelu, and edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot. Tracks the news forgot to play. I'm Alex.
And I'm Nate.
I'll end up in bloopers.
Hi, Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. Are you looking for a beach read this summer? May I suggest your big wireless bill? It's got suspense, mystery, a slightly flat, emotional arc, and a shocking twist where you realize you've been overpaying the entire time. Fortunately, though, Mint's story is better. Every plan, $15 a month, even unlimited. That's it. Happy ending, 0 tears.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.